and then
Yeah,
you
David
two.
and I were looking at each other because the horns were here.
Yeah.
And I was like under
side
the
eye
horn.
each other.
You were that side.
This is a floppy stand.
To do.
Yeah.
What's that?
Don't put anything heavy on
I
it.
haven't got time to put any. Get another stand.
Right, so now I've got no music stand and no blue tap.
Oh yes, and
Okay, this is doing
Charlotte would
updates.
hold it.
Is Charlotte coming?
It should be. This has decided it's doing updates again, so I can't open anything. Quite. Yes, we did. I did say that we might make our own little video of it. If anybody's not able to come, might be interesting. So.
I wonder if I could do it like this. No, it's far too far away.
Where actually are we? Over here. This needs to be an actual plug socket.
No, I don't think
There's
I
one
can do
behind.
that. Can I cope with that?
Yeah, it's not going to point at us though, is it?
Oh, where do you need it? Oh, over there.
Actually,
One
I think-
behind
I
the
think
piano.
It's being videoed anyway.
Behind the piano.
Is there?
Yeah. The other one.
George, if Charlotte doesn't turn
Oh, yeah.
up,
Thank you.
should we make a student do it? Or are there any
What?
students coming?
Do you need a page turner?
I need someone to hold the music. Because I have no music stand now.
So, what do you want me to do?
Hold it.
Just sit there and hold it in midair?
Charlotte will be here. Yes. What? That's how we did the recording.
Yes.
So, it won't go on the piano?
No, 'cause it's
Maria's
no-
sister held it like
Yeah.
this for me.
Well, no, because
Okay,
Because there's no foot on the piano.
I've
There
run
is
out of
music.
questions. Yeah,
Don't
okay,
worry,
just
Charlotte will be here.
Tell me what to do and I'll do
This
it.
one.
It's
Charlotte will be
fine.
here. Very relaxed about it. It's fine. Right, and I
Is
want
anyone
to
actually going to be here?
yes.
I want to see my beautiful. Oh, George is here.
Right, good.
He'll be very interested in the topic.
I think you know how it goes. You know how it ends.
Yeah. Well, these two have been blagging it for 20 odd years now.
It's
More than
not-
that, nearly 30. How long have you
Blagging?
been doing this? Blagging?
I don't know. I can't remember when I started. It's such a long time ago.
I want to see the beautiful PowerPoint.
You can't because this is doing updates again. I think it's done actually. No, it's still welcoming me to my own computer. This is why I don't move it. This is why it stays. I tell you, people and machines should remain completely.
Right, where are Maria and I going to go while you're gassing on?
Anywhere you like. There, it'd be fine.
How about we sit like
Sort
here?
of vaguely in
Should we
proximity
s-
to where
should we
you're
have
going
a
to
couple
end
seats
up.
here?
Yeah.
So let's move this one because nobody.
Yeah, I think
Nobody
let's
in the right
look
mind
as if
sits
we
on the
as
left
if we're a team and
notes
we,
like that, do they?
you know. Right, let me just.
Everything goes together. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, no. Well, they can move. I don't know.
To the host of Chinese people who go in here.
I don't think so. There's ever a host of anything
We're
really.
sitting close together, aren't we?
This isn't it, is it?
Public transport and stuff.
Right.
Is
Right.
lecture capture on
Every
yet?
word you say
Yeah, it's
is
on.
recorded.
Yes, the green mushroom. The mushroom is lit. Hello, Vice Chancellor.
Sorry,
It's all right. I don't care.
When's the next conscious bias training session?
I don't know. I've been trained in. I know when I'm being biased. Right, animation slideshow. Let's just see if this works. Slightly. This means I need to. This is HDMI. It's worked perfectly. Yes, it's working.
Hey!
And now Discord is doing updates.
You can just shut that. It doesn't matter. Discord updates every single time.
Yeah, I know. It's really annoying.
That's why I just don't open it.
This is counting. How do I make that do things? Yes, there it is.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
There
it's
we go.
happening. I don't know what you're worried about. I have to try and remember what this is about. And can I just check a sound clip? Renew. No. I can't make it go down. There we go. That's fine, that's better.
Stabbing
Okay.
at it like that wasn't helping, was
And then different iterations of bar. So you start it, then you drag it to the right place, and it doesn't see you.
it? Oh, where do you want it to start? I can change that.
No, about there. That'll be fine.
I
Yeah,
can
good.
change that.
That's working.
I can change that so it starts there if you want.
No, don't. No, not now. It's too late.
Shouldn't be able to say. You could have done that.
Then there's that. Then there's that. Then there's that. Things. We changed the photograph, Maria,
Thank you.
don't worry.
Thank you.
I don't know why. It's just I didn't think. Conclusions. Blah 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 blah. It's all working. Escape.
Puffins.
Puffins.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So puffins just appeared on the screen.
No,
Puffins appeared on the screen.
Puffins.
Okay, that's normal, isn't it? Obviously. Okay. Right, I think we're ready with 9 minutes to go.
Okay, I'll just get to the...
Shall that we'll just let the hordes of people in. I could get my violin out actually, and then I'll go to the...
Oh yeah, that probably.
That would be a good idea. Because we
You're
have,
not going to
like,
make it
no
obvious
time.
where we're supposed to speak, are you?
What?
You're going to make it obvious where we're supposed to
Oh
speak.
yeah, because I don't know.
Yes, I'll use words like, Maria, would you like to say something about blah, or...
No.
And then,
Actually, you're going to say no. You come all the way over here to say that.
Yeah, no, but you're going to stand up to say things.
Yeah, just it's informal. This is not the RMA.
Just set up the thing as well. Wait, so where was I here?
Yeah,
I can't remember.
yeah, you were that side. Hello, Trisha, how are you?
Oh, well,
Hi, very nice to see you. I need a wee table. I've seen one somewhere. A table. These are your discs, aren't they? The ones that are separate.
Hopefully.
Right, okay. I will stick this out at the front. Actually, I'll just use a chair. Sorry, I'm just telling you that this is where I'm putting them, right? Because I've got no memory anymore.
Okay.
Discs. Prime machine. Oh, hello, Michael. Very nice to see you. How are you?
I think it very much actually, I think it's 12, is it?
Actually, 11:45 technically,
right.
apparently.
Oh, right.
We'll be a bit up to the wire because there's a lot to do.
Yes, my friend, I went actually.
Yeah. Oh, no, of course, that's fine.
Yeah.
With a bit of luck, we'll finish then, but I don't know whether we start on time or not.
Yeah.
We'll try to get through.
Yeah.
How are you?
Right, thank you, yes, yes.
Um,
Hard work of,
Okay.
technology.
yes. I'll just get this
I'll let you get started.
primed and
Yes.
ready to roll. Sorry? No, I won't. I know. So this is B8. That's the cadenza. You don't want that because that's when we don't like it. Oh. So that's there. I'll just change the needle. that's ready to go. 5 minutes, that's enough. Sorry.
Get your table. There's your,
Oh, are you?
There's your numbers.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
No.
I'll let you do things then. I'm not getting them. This is not something that always practical. So I was here.
Ooh.
I thought no.
Very exciting.
Was it? That's right, isn't it, Maria? You were there.
I can't remember in fact.
Well, we could just look at the photographs.
Yeah.
It's a bit. Right. 4 minutes. Hello. Welcome. Come in.
So get up with you.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm George.
Hello, George.
Oh, brilliant. David? David?
Yes.
I bring news. Carry on doing what you do. You can multitask. Even if you're alone.
I'm not sure. Yes.
Steve is just compressing the new wonderful Chase folder now. It's going onto the memory stick even as we
Even as we. Fantastic.
The thing is, I brought it in before I came here with a very large, embarrassing sort of keyring fob type thing attached to it.
Excellent.
Made of bright yellow wood with the words written on it, very important key, which I got from that amazing hardware shop between here and the church.
Oh yes. I know the one with yes, with
Brilliant shop.
steel buckets and stuff outside.
Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
it's a good shop though.
So it's
Yeah.
too embarrassing to have it lying around.
Good. Right, I'm going to pop to the loo. I have 2 minutes in which to do so. I will drink more coffee. That will make me speak faster, and therefore leave more time for other things more interesting.
Sorry, it's a left hand. I'm very excited.
Yeah, very well.
Hiya.
Hello.
Are you?
I'm looking at you in a particular way.
Why?
Favour. Excellent. No music stand.
No music stand.
Or Charlotte will. Oh, honestly.
What
am I holding
how,
now?
The only thing, I'm not sure how long, David didn't say how long this was. And I'm teaching in about 50 minutes.
Oh, yeah, morning. Charlotte.
Well,
Good morning.
Alright.
Yeah.
It's Charlotte.
So
You're
apologies
gonna have
if
to
I
hold
do.
it.
What am I holding it?
Because there's no stand. That's what Sophia did when we recorded it. She held it.
Is there not a stand for it anywhere?
Well, they're going through exactly the same questions I was asking. It's fantastic.
Are you?
I'm very well.
Well, if you
How are
listen to the talk,
I don't expect to start.
yeah, well, it had to be my sister last time.
That's fine.
We did the recording. He had
These
the
an hour and a
whole
half.
stand there.
Slightly
I mean, I guess
less
it just
than
would have been
that.
memorised.
think it's, yeah.
No,
It's
often not.
technically it's an hour.
Okay, I'm fascinated.
They used to have music stands 100%. Yeah, there are photographs.
I'll sit on this side.
So we get that.
I know. Well, we could ask Duncan to make it. Knowing him, he probably would actually.
So I know you're about to start, but really quick question because it really interests me. So I
Hi, it's George, is it?
Yes,
Facebook.
yes, absolutely. Yes,
No, I'm Jeff.
sorry.
I'm the one who puts up slightly annoying comments on the Not always.
Always welcome.
Yeah. It's part of the game. Mind you, we have to be careful. I had a supposed friend. He's a classic unfriendly. I didn't say anything offensive, they just didn't like what I was saying. And that-
Good morning. I think if it's all the same, I am going to start starting.
They are. Sorry.
Mainly because there's quite a lot to get through. I haven't had quite enough coffee to do this quickly enough, but I want to do so in order to... Ooh, that's interesting. That's lost... No, it hasn't lost communication with my PowerPoint. So first of all, a very warm welcome to everybody. And I'm going to talk about this, which is something that's been sort of preoccupying me. Now, I think Alfred Einstein, at the beginning of his little book on Schubert, I think it was him. It was also, I think, Roger Bullivant said the same thing at the beginning of his book on fugue. Said, quote, "This is not a textbook about fugue." And I think Alfred Einstein said, "This is not a textbook about Schubert." And this, in one sense, you could say, is not a research talk, which is a good way of starting a research forum talk. I think my definition of research is that it has to have research questions. The question is, what are the questions? And I think one of the key questions, really, that comes out of this is how might I personally join together all the various bits of my life as a performer, as a teacher and mentor, and also as a sort of scholar. And the answer, to a certain extent, is like this, in this project, which I'm going to talk a little bit about today. I'm going to rattle through fairly quickly. I have Ruth, my wife, Maria, my colleague and student here, and they're going to talk to you a little bit about one or two bits of this, or I'm going to invite them to, hopefully. And we're going to play to you a little bit later as well. So it should all hopefully be fairly self-explanatory. There are three sort of bits to this that I'm going to do. First, I'll give you a little bit of background context. The project that we grandly call the Bach Double Violin Concerto Project ended up having effectively two phases. It's not over because documenting the project is something that's still coming up. But the first phase was a modern technology recording, which we'll talk a little bit about and demonstrate to you. But also it birthed a kind of acoustic mechanical recording element. Some of you in this room have heard me talk about this before, and therefore I will attempt to be succinct and not go on too much about the whole process of doing that, but I will briefly sort of give the kind of context to that. So, this is the opening context. Let me just play you a few seconds of this recording and then tell you why I am. And if I just, in a very unplanned way, drag this to roughly where I think I need to go to, it's easier said than done, because for some reason it's not. Here we go. And you suddenly find this happens in the middle of the last movement. Okay, so cast one's mind back 30 years this coming summer. I was in the British Library National Sound Archive researching my masters, and I came across this recording, and I literally, my mouth fell open when I heard the insertion of this cadenza in the last movement. Okay, and that was in one sense a bit of a kind of catalyst for the project, because many years later I just sort of stumbled across it, and Maria and I met, and I said, why don't we have look at this. I've always wanted to do this. I've always wanted to perform this with this cadenza. And that, to a certain extent, is where the whole kind of project started. It was just simply a kind of conversation. We had to play through it for fun. And I sort of said, how about we sort of put a project together, we perform it, and then maybe we record it as well. Why not? So that was sort of the start of this project. You know, it seemed like an interesting thing to do. There are lots of different ways of performing Bach, of course. I'm rather hoping that in 2025 we've left behind aside these rather tortured phrases like historically informed and composer intentions, and also, dare it be said, historically accurate. That seems to be a new one that people keep saying, and that we've actually now finally reached the stage in which we accept that we can do all sorts of different things quite legitimately in different ways if we want to, as long as we know that we are doing them, which is the key thing. And this, in one sense, was a kind of illustration of that. And it was just something that I thought also, quite frankly, would be fun. I think we're allowed to have fun sometimes. So, you know, so that was something I wanted to do. And the thing that came out of this, though, is that if we were going to perform this, do this with this 19th century cadenza by Josef Helmersberger, Viennese violinist, which is the sort of purpose of this, we would need some kind of way of putting that in a performance context. And the first thought was, what about editions of the rest of it? So the obvious thing seemed to be to look at 19th century editions I was familiar with. This is an extract from the first violin part of the Andreas Moser, Josef Joachim edition of this, as published in Volume 3, 16 masterworks of the Violinschule of 1902 to 5. And it involves, as you can probably see here, some things that people tell me are 19th century things exclusively. It's not actually true. There's plenty of instances of this in 18th century literature as well. But these slurred up bow staccatos, things that would help us to put, if we did it from an edition like that, it would be interesting for us to do. It would also provide a kind of context for the 19th century cadenza that we were going to do. So that was one of the kind of decisions that we made, sort of about that. So again, just to sort of demonstrate in one sense the fact that I take a very open-ended view of aspects of history and style and stuff, I thought I'd just play you a few seconds of a different historical context of performing Bach. And I'm not talking about Baroque violins. I'm talking about this kind of thing. I'll put it in the right place. So that's what I did on Wednesday. On Thursday, I might play Baroque violin. Yeah? And I think this is the thing. This is the kind of thing that I've been trying for a long time to try and get people to understand, is that historical performance research provides us with the opportunity for more opportunities. It is not designed to say you must play Bach on Baroque instruments, you must do X. In fact, I don't like the use of imperatives when it comes to musical performance. I don't think morality has got anything to do with it, to be honest. I think, you know, as long as we make informed decisions. So I put that up there just as an illustration of 10 years ago now, a very different understanding of Bach to the one that we were doing in this, and which I might do on another occasion. It's a simple point. But in one sense, I think, therefore, this whole idea of taking a piece of music that is canonic, well-known, obviously celebrated, and, you know, seeing in one sense that performance is like a palimpsest, it's like a kind of collage, layers and layers of different things, some of which you can tease apart, and you can look at not necessarily the original, or whatever we think that might be, but you can actually look at some of the performing history of a work, and gain interesting insights out of doing that, and to a certain extent, that was the point of this project. So, this is where we ended up. We ended up with making a recording here, actually, at the University of Huddersfield, about, well, nearly a year ago now, actually, March last year. So this was a performance we did. This we used, we played the cadenza. we used a 19th century edition. We played on gut strings, 19th century gut strings. And we integrated quite freely aspects of, I suppose, what you might describe a late 19th, early 20th century style of playing. And I might, in a moment, I'm just going to play a couple of little clips of this. And then I'm going to sort of ask Maria if she's prepared to say anything about this, because, I mean, I've been involved in doing this kind of stuff for a long time, and I sort of move and flip between these things, but this is your first experience of doing that, and I'd be quite interested to just, you know, any kind of remarks you've got, practical remarks about playing in this kind of way. So I'll just play you just a few seconds of this. I'm just going to literally flit around the recording because we don't really have time for this. Can you hear that all right? Is that okay? Yeah. If I just let's go to a bit of the slow movement. I'm just giving you a few little illustrations. So you get a bit of an idea of that sound world, and I'll just see if I can pick up a little bit of the finale. In fact, I'm just going to go towards the cadenza. Sorry, this works at home because I can actually read the numbers, but they're too small. Okay, so I want you to hold that sound world in your head, because in the course of this morning we've got two other iterations of this. We're going to play bits of it actually on an acoustic recording, but also in two different ways, and also bits of it live as well. So one of the things that I think this project has allowed, I called it multidimensional, and it is, in the sense that we can compare and contrast various different ways of looking at this, different technologies, different occasions in which we actually physically perform this kind of stuff, and it provides a kind of a context. So we recorded this, and I think this is, I mean, it's fairly unusual to do this kind of thing anyway. I mean, it's only relatively recently that we've sort of come to terms with the notion of performing Bach in a deliberately stylistically and historically anachronistic way. As George, of course, and I may remember a performance of Brandenburg Fourth Concerto at the University of Leeds with, from a set of 19th century parts which involved pianoforte accompaniment and various other replacement of wind instruments by further string instruments by Ferdinand David, which was an interesting thing to do. And this sort of, in some ways, acted in the same way. You can see there that we've used, the piano is a Broadwood of about 1897, which is sort of stylistically appropriate to what we were aiming at in this kind of project. And we are playing on thick cut strings. So these are not Baroque strings, which are often quite thin. These are not Baroque violins. These are effectively 19th century violins, in the sense that the only thing really that separates, the most major thing that separates so-called modern instruments and the so-called 19th century violin are the string material. There are other differences as well we could go into if we were being really fine-grained, but that's the main thing. So, Maria, I wonder if you could just sort of just say what you think. I mean, your first, we've never really talked about this really, have we? But I mean, what was it like? You know, just using gut strings and all of that kind of stuff. Have you got any?
Well, it was my first experience using gut strings, and they sound much nicer than metal strings. The timbre is so much warmer and rounder, especially the E string. I mean, the metal strings are often quite twangy. And the gut strings are a lot warmer, but they completely leave different grooves in your fingers. I had to get used to them a lot. And then moving back to switching between metal and gut for different things, it was definitely a bit weird on my fingers to feel it, but it was definitely very fun.
Did you find that you bowed differently?
Yeah, no, I mean, it completely changed the way that I thought about playing in different circumstances, and playing all these Bach with this, 19th century ideas is definitely very different. I mean, I grew up thinking, oh, you have to play Bach without vibrato and with open strings and this and that and this and that. But using vibrato and doing all of the slides and the upbow staccatos has definitely changed the way of what I as a musician can do, and the musical choices that I can make to do it in the 19th century, style, or historically accurate, or whatever, or however I really want to do it. And so it's definitely quite eye-opening, the work that I can do as a musician.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And I think that's the point, really, is that it's sort of opening out these various things. I realise, by the way, don't sit down yet, I've got something else I wanted to ask you. But I realised that I haven't done my "What did you do on your summer holidays" piece of coursework, which you were supposed to do after you come back from sabbatical. And one of the things that my last sabbatical was to try and write thoughts down on so-called romantic violin performing practices. But the key thing with that is that I'm interested in actually disseminating these ideas now. I want folk like Maria, for example, to sort of take hold of these ideas and not necessarily say this, just have it, as you say. I think, there's other choices. That was the whole point, really. And that's, for me, that the point, it was one of the kind of disseminative elements of this kind of form of research. It's not that you tell people that you're doing it wrong, now we're going to do it differently, and that's right. It's nothing as simple as that. It's more a question of providing opportunities to resource what comes next, and to use scholarship as a way of doing it. And that's one of the things that was central to the sort of enthusiasm I have for sort of doing this. It's not just the fact that we did this, but it's also the fact that we were embedding these sort of ideas. Thanks for that. And just the other one whilst you're there as well, because we're talking about history, we're talking about recordings, we're talking about Bach. What I'm not talking about quite so much is the fact that since about a year ago, our work together has involved far more than just simply having fiddle lessons. We now play together actually professionally. There's 4 of us here playing string quartets on the 22nd of February in a group that came out to a certain extent, was inspired by this project. But also I was very keen that we sort of try different things, that you get involved in doing stuff. And one of them was recording, of course, which I think that was your first experience of doing that. So, how was that for you, as it were? What was it? Was it useful having that experience, and what was it like to go in there and record this?
Yeah, well, the extent of my recordings that I had previous to this was just recording things for auditions. And, you sit in your living room and record for about however much you want until you get a recording good enough to send in to wherever I want to do. And this is completely different. I mean, we spent the entire day at the place, and it was very interesting. I mean, we took about 2 full takes of each movement, and then after that, Ruth and my dad sat at the back of the hall. He was critiquing on every little bit that you do.
They were producing, yes, they were
producing.
told to do that.
And it was definitely a very, very different experience to what. I mean, you have to think about every little aspect so meticulously, but on the other hand, you have the freedom to take as many takes as you want and pick the one that you're most happy with, and then produce a recording after that. So it's definitely a different way of thinking to what.
So did you find that playing for a recording, I mean, are there any sort of obvious things that, I'm sorry I haven't asked you to think about this, but are there any obvious things that were different when we did that, compared to, say, if we just, because we've done it live, of course. In fact, we did it live here. How was it different in terms of how you actually played it, or was it? Were you conscious of that?
Well, I guess doing it live is so different. You've got, so much adrenaline, and you are making silly mistakes here and there. But then you also have the excitement of, playing it to an audience that you do as a performer. That's the reason that we do it. And recording is so different. It's a lot, on one hand, a lot more calm, because you can take your time and do the takes and this and that. But you also have to think about it a lot harder, and think about everything that, this bit was slightly out of tune, or this bit I was rushing or dragging. And you have to purposely think about doing it slightly different to what you did last time. And in a live performance, you don't get that.
Yeah, exactly. But of course, because of modern technology, you could just do other takes, and you could do, to a certain extent, we were set up, and you've seen the photograph, we played it in that hall with an orchestra after that, about a month later. But we are more or less, I suppose, how we might be if we actually did have an orchestra. And of course, therefore the technology itself moves around us. There's rather a contrast when you make a mechanical recording, and we'll talk about that a bit later. But that's really helpful, thanks for that, because we'll talk about a bit later how making a mechanical recording, which we're going to simulate the conditions of doing that, how that was quite a different thing. Thanks, Maria, that's brilliant. So there are those kind of things that happened, and so far so good. I think this is probably, I don't know whether this is true, but I think that they're relatively, it's relatively common, I think, for people at your stage of life, Maria, to sort of do things with Baroque instruments, but 19th century stuff not so much. And I think this is probably one of the areas of innovation in this was partly sort of doing that. And it was, and I have to say that to me it was really interesting, because people tell me how difficult these things are, and yet they'll tell me that it's so different and it's so difficult, but actually, if you don't mind me saying, you just more or less got on with it, as indeed did I when I first started looking at this. It is different, but I think one of the things about a lot of our experience of musicians is that we are used to being adaptable. We're constantly being asked to do things in weird places, sit in an orchestra pit, this, that, and the other, heat and light and warmth and all of these other factors vary enormously, and we've become very good at that. We sort of adapt. We adapt quickly because circumstances vary, and this is a relevant point, because an awful lot has been said about various forms of phonograph effect, to use Mark Katz's phrase, about how the process of recording impinges upon impinges upon what? There's a sense here probably that only a live performance, whatever that means, because that varies enormously as well, is sort of the genuine thing that is the ideal, and that everything else isn't, which seems a bit odd, since we now live considerably over a century after the invention of recording, in which this is a very substantial part of our lives. And for all of us here who were involved in trying to make sense of being musicians during COVID-19, we very quickly had to find ways of being both creative and productive in ways other than a live concert to live participants. So it's quite interesting, I think, all of that kind of stuff, different ontologies and so on. Anyway, I digress, and I'm going to move on a little bit. Yes, we performed it live. There's just a photograph of us doing that. In fact, we've done bits of it several times, haven't we? And it's sort of the kind of thing that we can more or less trot out if we need to now, which is a good position to be in for something like this. But the next thing I wanted to talk to you a little bit is to just segue into the sort of next stage, the second major phase, which was this idea that we would make a mechanical recording of this. And the inspiration of that, again, whereas the inspiration for doing this stuff with the Helmersberger cadenza and gut strings and stuff came out of the 2020 monograph that I wrote, the 2022, I think it was finally published, with COVID getting in the way, a disc of new acoustic recordings, which I made with erstwhile Leverhulme research fellow Ina Stanovic, was sort of like the other part of the inspiration. So it's, you know, I mean, I've spent a lot of time studying the content, I suppose you might say, of historical recordings. It is, for all of the problems with historical recordings, we are actually hearing musicians of the past make noises. And that's a really exciting thing, and we can learn an awful lot from that. However, quite how much we learn from that, and in what ways, is of course one of those kind of questions that has always been rather difficult to answer. There are, of course, numerous limitations of the great variety of historical technologies that one could name. And therefore you have to listen intelligently, you need to make allowances for certain sort of elements. And so it was very, very exciting in 2020, just before COVID, and I have talked in this room about this at some length, so I shall do just literally in a couple of sentences now, to have the opportunity to do this. This album of discs, you can see, this is up on our website, it's part of the University of Huddersfield Pennine Records label, as we call it. You can look at that. We made a recording which to a certain extent emulated aspects of historical style of playing, violin, solo piano, and some violin and piano repertory, some of which are closely based on very famous recordings by people like the Hungarian violinist József Joachim, or Arnold Rose, again, was an inspiration for what we've been doing with this Bach project as well. I will just leave you with that thought because you can look at that in your own time. There you go, there's the album cover for that. And that was another inspiration. It made me think, well, what about if we now do that with this Bach double project? Why don't we look about into making an acoustic recording of this? Now, I like the fact that this phrase, you know, the right people in the right place at the right time seems rather glib, but actually there's a lot in it. We wouldn't have done this if we didn't do things together from a start, and that's been a very major part of a catalyst for all sorts of things. But also, we have in Sheffield Duncan Miller of Vulcan Records. And Duncan is one of about 3 or 4 people worldwide who's expert in making mechanical recordings. That is, no electric microphones, you know, recording horns, wax discs, all of that kind of stuff. And he's in the same, you know, we live in the same town. I mean, it's extraordinary. So it was a great opportunity to sort of think, well, we should do this then. We should look into doing this because Arnold Rose made a number of recordings. His quartet made recordings. There are some from the 1920s, 22, 23, I think George will correct me, and then there are various electric recordings made in 27, 28, the Czech HMV, which included indeed this bar double with small orchestra. But he also made a number of solo recordings in about 1909, 1910. And sort of in the spirit of that, we thought, right, okay, well, let's record this, and indeed let's record the cadenza whilst we're at it as well. So that's what we decided to do. And this, look, a context for that is that certainly George and I are members of the Early Recordings Association. I just thought I'd put this up and flag it up. Inya, who is a visiting research fellow here, also now works at the University of Surrey. And if you're interested in this at all, go and look on the website. It's absolutely fascinating depth of study of exactly what it is that we can know and not know, and experiment with actually trying to put into practice. And having the opportunity to actually make recordings by these historical methods gives you a totally different view of what is possible and what isn't possible. You're not speculating about, well, you can't take account of this parameter because we don't know. Well, actually, you know, Ruth and Maria and I and George, I think, all in this room, all of us have experience of making mechanical recordings. And a handful of years ago, you know, I don't know how many people, very, very, very few people on the planet were alive who had this experience. But here we have had that experience, and we can actually tell you what it's like. So it's a really fascinating thing to do as part of a research project, so we decided that we would do that as well. Is this where we get to that? I forget my own slideshow. Yeah, okay. So first, before we talk about it a bit, and I'm going to actually play some of the recordings that we got, let's talk about some of the headline things, for those of you who might not know very much about it. So the first really obvious limiting factor is that if you're going to record some music by this means, you have a very limited continuous span of time in which to do so. That is one of the sort of major factors. So a 12-inch gramophone record disc, usually you've got about 4 minutes, a bit more if you're really lucky. But Duncan Miller, with whom we've all worked, he is limited at the moment, I think, by making 10-inch discs. And these have a side length of about 3 minutes and a few seconds over. So that's all we knew, that we would have to record in chunks and that we would have to make sure that it didn't exceed 3 minutes. And we'll talk about the implications of that later. It's the slightly lost art of cutting brutally in the case of this piece is something that comes out of it. I realise actually I've made a mistake, which is somewhere I've got a handout. I don't know where it's gone. I'll see if I can find it. Because at the time, because I decided to. Oh, here they are. Yeah, let me distribute these because we'll talk about this a bit later. I've only done 10, so it's one between two or something. I can start with Dr. Kennaway. There's exactly, we just sort of go around the room and stuff. So I thought I'd show you on this, just basically how, an example of how we did the cutting and where we did the cutting, and then we'll actually play it. Anyway, so limited side length, that is one of the kind of factors that we had to deal with. We didn't get that in St Paul's. We had all day. We could take any amount of digital sound. In fact, that was a limit for us because I think we both got very tired at the end. Decided, you reach a point at which it starts to get worse again, and you think, no, actually, we've got enough material here. But with this, no, you obviously can't edit it. You can't do anything with it. You've only got 3 minutes. You've also got, getting into position. Now, some of my students here who normally hear me talk to you on Wednesday mornings, you've seen some of this, and we've talked about it a bit, but you are not able to just put yourself, can't just put mics on the end of wires wherever you want them. You have to, just sort of go with moving the performers to where the affordances of the equipment. It's a fairly obvious point. We've also got how you record. Now, this is something I'm going to talk about later because this became actually really quite interesting with 2 violins and a piano. Now, there's going to be further excitement and interest a week on
Tuesday.
A week, yeah,
Yesterday.
in 6 days' time. The 4 of us are making an acoustic string quartet recording. Some tests for in Sheffield, exactly, and that's not been done. As far as we know, nobody has done this since probably the mid-1920s is the latest. And this, we'd have very little information about how anybody did this. So there is an element of practice, research, and also sort of experiential learning, not just by us, but also by our expert recording engineer. So anyway, so we've got those kind of things. And we've also got, we obviously can't edit it. So just to let you know with this, that you're recording onto a wax disc. We will show some photographs to demonstrate this. You cannot edit this. That everybody knows, right? What you can do, of course, is you can do another side, but it's expensive because the whole process is quite complex. And certainly in modern times, having a wax disc, which is about that thick and heavy, and it has to be absolutely, flat and straight and not have any bubbles in it and not be a funny shape, and it doesn't want to get too hot or too cold or anything else. It's really quite difficult. There's pretty high pressure really that you've got to get it right. But the other thing about it as well is that the process of then, you can't just, you can play it, but it will damage it. But you need to, in terms of actually creating a physical disc from it, we were unable to hear the results of what we'd done for about a month. So we couldn't hear anything about it. We had no idea what was going to come out until after the event, after we'd done it. And that is a very, very different experience. In this age of sort of instant gratification, this is like the absolute opposite of it. So the whole thing, psychologically and practically, is very different. You have to play differently for an effective recording is something that we're going to talk about very shortly. So I'm going to quickly go on to this and then sort of show you a few of these things. So here's a photograph of us doing this. And in a few minutes' time, we're going to try and replicate this a little bit in this room. So what you can see there, apologies to those who've seen this already, is that Maria and I are each trying to get the instrument quite close to the bell of the recording horn in order to make a recording that can be heard, put simply. Ruth, as you can see, has her back to both of us. So this is the point. We cannot really communicate with each other at all. We couldn't communicate with Ruth. You couldn't look at us. We had to sense and know how we were going to put this thing together, just by the fortunate fact that the three of us know each other quite well and have played music together quite a lot. So that was a good thing. If we didn't, it would be quite interesting. The other thing that you can see here is as well is that the two recording horns are joined together by a length of rubber tubing, which is effectively like a T-junction. Now, I don't know how many people here can remember, I think you probably have to be at least by generation to know about this, those horrible rubber things that you used to stick on bath taps. You know those kind of things. So you've got a hot and cold water taps, and you stick it together, and you spend ages fiddling around because, you know, if you put even a slightest amount of cold in, it's immediately freezing cold, and you struggle, and it's really annoying. That's sort of what we ended up doing, because what we ended up having is we have to balance effectively the signal between us down these two horns. If you stick too much down one of them, it obliterates the other one. And you cannot know what's happening until after you've done it. So you have to do it by a form of inference, as it were. Now, it gets worse than that, because there aren't just two of us doing it, there are three of us doing it. So the piano sound is effectively ambient noise that is being captured in the background. And in fact, I think, if I remember, it doesn't look from here, but Marie, I think the sort of funnel that you were playing into was a bit wider than mine. And I think the idea was that more of the piano would come through. So you had a further problem, which is that you had to be aware of the fact that you had to let a bit of room through for Ruth. So it was an interesting thing, a very, very different experience. I'm going to ask you about, both of you, about this in just a minute. But here at Lero's, a slightly more aerial photograph. You can see there that the piano in the background, upright piano, we were just having a quick chat about that a moment ago, with its panels removed, so that it's got a very sort of direct sort of sense of sound. We've done the same thing to that little brown machine in the corner there, in the hopes that it will give us some sort of sense of that. And so on. There's another picture. There's the equipment. That blue thing is the wax disc. Duncan seems to like to dye them that colour just because it's easy to see where the groove is. There's nothing more significant. I have no idea whether they did that at the time. They might have done. I must ask him about it next week. So you've got that kind of thing. So where have we got to? We're going to play in a minute. In 4 minutes we have to play. I said 11:11 is, otherwise we won't have time to do this. In which case, what I think I'm going to do, because you can read about this on our website, I wrote an article on there which is more coherent than this because it's not trying to do quite so much. I think I'm going to now, in which case, go straight to showing you some of the results of this. In fact, I am going to play you one of the records. So we had these records made as they were, with a nice label in the middle and all the rest of it. This is my sort of 1930 little portable gramophone, which isn't the most highfalutin thing in the world. I've got a big one upstairs which would make a better sound, but unfortunately it has a component that would persuade the engineering department here to make a 3D part. So these actually are single-sided discs. The originals were made of shellac, but this is not. This is made of some modern material that Duncan has sort of got together, which, unlike the originals, these are virtually indestructible, whereas the originals are very, very fragile. So I thought I would play you the first side of this. So if you've got access to the handout, you will see where this is. So this sort of goes over, I think, onto the second page, where you get the second iteration of double stop quavers, which comes to a rather abrupt halt. Sorry? I'm going to play side one, yeah. So this is the first side of the recording. That says side two. That's bizarre. B8. Okay, right. Helps if you have perfect pitch and you can adjust it. Now, at the start of this, you have to listen to all 3 minutes of the Just for those of you interested, the horn is actually integral here, so it's not like sticking out like on an HMV record. It's all in there, there's a port there. So basically, it's a process of musical instruments play into a musical instrument, and then it's played back on a musical instrument, which I think is rather nice actually. Should we get into our positions? And then we have the crashing 7th chord, and there you have to turn the side over, and then you would get the cadenza. So that's basically how it works, and you've only got that. So the other thing, by the way, is worth noting is that every time you play a record, you have in this one, you have to wind it up, and you have to change the needle. It says very, very much on these HMV originals. It says, what does it say? I can't remember now. Use each point once only, it says. So you faff around, so it's not instant listening. Everything you do, you have to put a bit of effort into listening, actually. I'm going to take the record off there. The lid has a habit of falling. I slightly damaged one of these by falling on top of it, so I'll remove it out. It's the way. So anyway, so it's time for us to sort of do a little bit of practical demonstration, and I'm going to ask both Maria and Ruth to just talk a little bit about that. Shall we do it? Shall we play first, or do you want to talk first? I'll talk first. Okay. So can I invite Ruth? Would you just talk a little bit about the piano playing point of view of this? If you could see what was going on there. Just tell us a little bit about what it was like, and any other kind of remarks that you might want to make.
So you can see that the piano's been prepared pretty much as we had it for the recording. We took the front panels off literally to get the maximum sound possible out of the instrument. So that creates an immediate issue of how the music is placed, having not memorised the whole score. So there's another practical issue that was odd about the whole experience. I will be playing the piano today in a way that I would not normally do in public. So to ensure that the piano sound is heard on the horn, even the distance between the horn and that piano, which is very small in the living room, even that distance could be enough to render the piano inaudible on the recording. So essentially my remit was to bash the hell out of it. And so today I'll be reconstructing that in a way that you might find rather unnuanced as a performance, but we're going to reconstruct what we did for the recording into a horn. So that, from my point of view, is a very different way of playing the piano for pianists in the room. The main factors are to use a very high finger movement that gives the maximum attack the whole time into the keys. Forget about nuancing ends of phrases because it will just disappear off the recording. And I've listened to enough acoustic recordings with piano accompaniment to hear the effect of that. So it's sort of combating the physical circumstances all the time, basically, and making an extremely articulated sound. Things like doubling octaves as well to give more bass resonance to the sound, hoping that can be picked up by the horn as well. So you'll hear some potentially odd effects from the piano, but just wanted to explain why you're going to hear a slightly brutal sound.
Thank you. And Maria, just tell us, I mean, how is this? Because I mean, everybody says this is so difficult and you can't do it. And, you know, it's. I mean, there is famous accounts of people, you know, playing in these conditions, saying it was virtually impossible. And this has been used as an argument to say that what you hear on these recordings is so inadmissible. There's no point really bothering about it. But how did you actually find doing it?
It is definitely quite odd. It's very different to the digital recording that we made, because with the horn, it creates the tube. It's so in the way. We have to figure out where to put the stand, because I also hadn't memorized it, and figure out how to play without actually hitting anything. Because if you hit anything, it would, you know, create a noise and mess up the recording. And so I had to play in a way that probably wouldn't have in an actual normal setting. And without seeing root was also really hard to start with, because it starts with just the semiquavers straight off the bat without anything, and trying to figure out how to do that quickly and together in time was definitely a very interesting experience.
Shall we have a go then? So we're going to sort of simulate what happened. I see Ruth move this out of how it was a little bit by moving the strands over there. So you just imagine the pillars in the way, I think. So we put ourselves back to back, and I think you were that side.
Yeah.
Were you? Yes, that's right. So we're going to sort of do, so what you've got to obviously imagine the bell and the horns. And the way that this works, by the way, is the recording engineer, you know, there's a moment of silence. You know when the needle, you hear this sort of sound down the end of the horn. And that's all they would have heard in the early years, because usually all the equipment was behind a wooden wall, so you wouldn't be able to see it. It was trade secrets and so on. So all that was before you get was this recording horn sticking out of a bit of wood, and then you would hear this thing, and then you knew there was time to go. But you have this thing of, you know, he puts his hand up in the air, and then we have to go almost immediately. So you'll have to sort of imagine that. Shall we try and, let's just try and remember what it felt like to do that. Yeah. So I think, you know, you have to say, the music stands were not quite where we've got them now, because the horns have to get in the middle to get in the way. So we're going to just sort of do it and see what happens. And we're going to do these slightly brutal cuts as well. So another danger is not forgetting the cuts or getting lost. Whether we manage that, we'll see. Okay, let's go.
And then you wait and you wait and you wait and you wait, and he eventually says something like lock, groove, and then you can move. So that's basically how we do it. No, we did the conundrum, you decided you weren't going to do that. We haven't played it for about 6 months. So that's basically how it works. I've largely run out of time, unfortunately, but just quickly. There's a legacy. This is one of the legacies. So one of the things that came out of all of these things together is that we thought, let's get together and play lots of chamber music together and try and bring together pedagogy, research and performance. So we formed a group and we played, and I think anything that I do is gigantic and enormous, and so this was. So we did Shostakovich Piano Quintet and Tchaikovsky Souvenir de Florence as our launch concert, and there's a picture of us smiling, relieved because we've just done it. And we've got a concert, the four of us are playing string quartets. That was birthed out of this project as well. It's not just the research, it's also the fact that this ended up being, it's created an entire community really, hasn't it? It's been an extraordinary thing with many facets to it. So quick conclusions. So we can analyse side by side all of these things. This is a phase that hasn't really happened yet, but it is quite remarkable actually listening to the electric recording and the acoustic recording, quite how similar they are. And you can hear many things. Yes, we had to adapt for both of those recordings, didn't we? It was not like playing to a live audience, but I don't know. There were different issues rather than more or fewer issues, I think. So that's one thing. Embarrassing, rare a little bit here. This is unusual to actually try and embed these kind of things into somebody before they get to university or music college. And it's also pretty unusual to do any of this kind of stuff with sort of acoustic recordings and period instruments and stuff. So I think it has quite a lot of points of innovation in it. And that's it really, and it created various things. So it's just a whistle-stop tour really of a project that we really enjoyed doing, and which brings together, as I say, all the various bits of what I've been doing in terms of trying to actually use this research to do something interesting, hopefully worthwhile. And there it is. So there are my references for you as they are on this occasion. And I will leave it there, hopefully for any kind questions that you may or may not have. Thank you very much for your attention. Jeff.
I'd like to get in first. The thing that struck me about going back to the earlier period, thank you very much for the demonstrations. They're fascinating. I have some knowledge of the early recording period in a different way. But I wanted to focus a bit on what you said right at the beginning about this notion of that there not being, in a sense, that there's no such thing as a definitive version, or if there is, it doesn't matter that much. And as long as and not so much that anything goes, but anything is possible and nothing is necessarily legitimate. But yeah. I wanted to ask. Obviously, we don't have any recordings from Bach's time.
Mm-hmm.
Would it make a difference if we did? Because we now have recordings of any modern music, or whether we call it classical music or whatever. We have recordings, and we also have what we now call definitive recordings of perhaps romantic 19th century work, which sometimes to some degree is fixed. The output. So, are we basically talking about the fact because we don't have the evidence of the exact evidence of what these things were like, we've now developed a practice whereby there can be interpretations far and wide. And is that the era over? Because, in the sense that anything that's now recorded as modern is a modern thing, are we going to get versions of that are so varied of more contemporary works? or even some of the classics,
That's very
the 19th century classics.
I mean, the first thing I would say is that, well, I mean, there are lots of layers to this, aren't there? I mean, what I'm thinking of is we are playing a Shostakovich quartet next week, and in fact, I've been listening to various ones, and I remember I've been searching for the 1958 studio recording, New York film, Leonard Bernstein, Shostakovich second piano concerto, and I've not found it because in those days, a recording, you know, if it was purchased by an educationalist, is the recording.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of thought about being definitive, is that you need to have a reference collection, you know, which was on LP, and yeah, sure enough of this because it makes me sound really ancient, but I mean that was the truth of it. You know, you didn't just download things, you didn't just access via Spotify any number of things. The notion of a definitive performance on record is something that I think is less the case now, in the sense that you can record it any way you like. The idea of a kind of pluralistic approach to style, I think, partly comes out of the affordances of the internet and the easy availability of numerous things. So I think in a funny kind of way, we've now reached a point, this is probably not answering your question, but where with live performance, obviously, that's it. I mean, we've talked, in fact, we've got various bits of promo in which we were asked that very question, by Ruth, in fact, what is special about a live performance? And I think we've all said various things like, well, it's for the people here in the room, and it's if, you know, it's here and gone, and when it's gone, it's gone. And obviously the existence of recorded sound, you don't get that. But I think increasingly there is a sense, possibly, that the lack of permanence of a recording, the lack of need for it to be definitive, it almost makes it more like a live performance. It seems to be psychologically, if nothing else. What would happen if we had recordings of Bach? Well, I don't know, because I think the thing that worries me generally is the whole notion about doing things in the right way. I'm a maverick. Everybody, most people here know that I'm not very good at following other people's rules and don't like doing that. And that definitely includes musical performance. If somebody says you must do that, I tend to go in the other direction just for fun. And I think there's a reason for that, though, which is I think the idea that we have to do things in certain ways creates a kind of really oppressive view of music as something. I mean, and people like Daniel Leach Wilkinson, for example, have written extensively on the notion that classical music performance is more heavily policed than anything else in terms of what you are allowed to do and not allowed to do. And I think the thing that worries me about the whole notion of definitive performance is that will be the case. So I'm very glad that there are no recordings of Bach. I'm sure that we wouldn't have enjoyed them very much. It was a very different time. Almost everything has changed. We have difficulties enough with recordings made a century ago, which are so very, very different from our senses of style. And of course, it's not just music either, is it? If one looks, for example, in fact, in my 2020 book, there is a reference to the Goon Show. Because if you take some of the kind of, funny delivery from the 1950s, what they are actually making fun of is elevated dramatic speech from the 19th and early part of the 20th century. Most of those jokes are lost on modern people because they don't know anything about what it was that they were satirising. But I think there is an element that high art becomes total parody after a while, and vice versa. So I think there's something about that. So I think, let's get away from the notion of definitive performance.
Is it the 19th century, in a sense, tended to? Is it the cult of the composer as well, and the cult of the idea? So in pop music, you have cover versions.
Yeah.
Which anything, almost anything goes. I mean, people might criticise them.
Yeah.
Are you saying, in a sense, we should be heading towards the idea of a cover version?
Well, possibly. I mean, I think
because that's the other end of the spectrum.
I mean, it varies enormously depending on what you're talking about. I think in the sort of classical German traditions of the 19th century, there was probably much more of a constructive work concept in operation earlier than for other traditions. It seems to me, and Dr. Kenway may agree or disagree with that. But if you take these kind of people like Louis Spohr and Joseph Joachim von Dam, they were, I think, more or less self-consciously creating a kind of sense of trying to sort of curate a tradition in a particular set ways. But I think, nonetheless, the idea that performance varies from day to day, that was, of course, itself an operationalised sort of figured world kind of nature of thought, wasn't it? That you are supposed to vary it. The notion of the composer and the performer, oh well, of course we haven't practiced it. Oh well, of course, we will do what comes in the moment. I mean, we do that now. Maybe I say that, I don't know. I think I probably do actually. I think that's been inherited in the modern age. But it's complex and it's fascinating. Yes.
It's possibly a silly question, but I have to ask why would you choose to go through the torture that you've gone through to get to where to create what you've created? Is perhaps all.
What do you mean in terms of doing acoustic recordings? Because you learn about what it is that you are hearing and analysing in terms of the historical documents. That's one of the major things for me. Is if you hear a recording of Joseph Joachim made in 1903, and you've actually had at least some experience of what it was to do that, it gives you a level of insight that otherwise you wouldn't have. That's one of the major things. As a matter of fact, quite apart from all of this history, I think it's a fascinating philosophical and artistic project as well of limitation. There's something fascinating, to me anyway, about having to be limited in certain ways and nonetheless managing to express creativity through the process anyway. But that's quite aside from anything I'm qualified to comment on, other than just as a violinist.
I was curious because all of the sort of modern or current recording techniques have been developed to get over the limitations of the previous generations of recording techniques. So I was curious, other than it was obviously a fun thing to do. I was curious,
it was
but the insight into why
there is a historical basis to that, and I think also it allows you to put things on a level playing field as well, so that you can compare what we did say with something that somebody did a century ago, and it would allow us to test various things. That was one of the things that and it's also the kind of fact that you hear certain things as well. I mean, what we didn't talk about much is the fact that you can't hear certain parameters quite so much, it seems to me. Vibrato, for example, is much harder to detect, I think, but portamento slides sort of leap out of the texture a bit more. And so you end up like you do in any situation. If it's like sitting at a piano that is awful in some respects but can do certain things, you think, right, okay, I'm going to try and make expressivity out of this by changing the way I play in order to make sense of what I'm having to play. And I think that's just, to a certain extent, in one sense, this is a non-story for most of us as musicians, because we do it all the time, but yet it's still very important to recognise that we are making these adaptations all the time. And I think it develops us and our versatility as musicians as well, which I think is quite useful.
May I make a comment?
Yes.
Just to say that I think one thing that, I don't know if you're not blowing your own trumpet, if you look on the album that David's made with Ines Stanovich in the Early Recordings Association website, you can download that for free. You'll hear there, you've performed the Joachim Romance, haven't you? Mm-hmm. Which, having been recorded by the acoustic process today, turns out remarkably similar to Joachim's recording. And that's really part of the point that David, having made himself a kind of disciple of Joachim's playing style, the ultimate fascination is to find out how much do I actually sound like him, or at least how much can I sound like him when he was recording, because that's all we know of him. Yeah. So that parity, I guess, is what you're ultimately trying to measure. And for, like I said, with playing the piano, the fascination with going back through that acoustic process is to find what actually had to be done differently. I mean, we've got a studio recording photographs of bizarre things like enormous horns that are basically an entire wall is a recording horn to try and capture a whole orchestra and bizarre things like that. So the fascination, I think, for us was how far do we have to stretch what we normally do to make a recording that sounds like a 1902 recording.
Yeah. Sorry, I'll go there and then to you if that's okay. We'd probably better leave it at that, because there's something in here after.
I don't know. We finish at quarter 2. We finish at quarter 2.
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
It's just a speculative question, because I mean, you're talking about how much you have to adjust the playing style, And I know in this period recording is rare, it's not mainstream, but it does become more accessible, it does become more normal.
Sure.
At what point can we speculate might the necessities, the technical necessities of recording seep into teaching practices and performance practices live? If
When is an interesting
any-
question? Is the kind of the testimony of recordings gets into literature relatively early on. And in fact, actually, I'll come to that, but one of the things that's interesting, Carl Flesch's memoirs, the violinist, a very famous violinist and teacher, right now, he writes about, there's a kind of what I describe as the holy trinity of 19th century violinists who survived long enough to make recordings. Joseph Joachim, born 1831, Pablo de Sarasate, born 1844, and Eugene Isaïe, born 1858. Joachim's recorded is 1903, gramophone typewriter. Sarasate, also I think gramophone typewriter, 1904. And Isaïe, I forget for whom, in 1912. Crucially, 8 years more development and experience of the recording technologies. I shouldn't go down this rabbit hole very much because we haven't got time, but it is worth noting that when I made recordings on this album, there you had to really play very loudly. I have a little broad upright piano which Inya Stanovich played unbelievably loud. I didn't know it was possible to get that amount of sound out of my poor little Anton 10 broadwood, which by the way seems to have thrived from the experience and is still going strong. But when we did this thing, Duncan said, well, that he'd sort of been, this is basically, what would you call it? I don't know. It's sort of learning by doing.
Experimental.
Yeah, very much so, because we don't know. These were trade secrets. He's having to invent practices, you know. So yes, it's speculative, and yes, the historian on me feels a little uncomfortable about how that process works. But nonetheless, he said, well, actually, I've done some work on this, and now we've got a better signal-to-noise ratio with this. And so the recording you did then, you know, when we did this, is about 1903. That kind of thing. The recording we made is about 1910 technology. And you do hear a difference. But yeah, so Carl Flesch talks about these violinists, and so basically, well, you can't really take them seriously because of the processes, and you know, none of them recorded very well. Interestingly, all of them represent different aspects of an ancien regime from which he was seeking to depart. And lucratively so in much of his teaching material. One is cynical about these things, I certainly am anyway. So, you know, there are arguments of convenience attached to the problems with recordings, but in terms of actually making adaptations in pedagogical practice, I don't know. I think that's a really, I'm not aware of it. George, do you know of anything in the string literature about where people in the early 20th century talk about how to make effective recordings?
Practically nothing. And the only, certainly as far as cellists go, the only one who seems to have really cared about the quality of the recording was actually Casals. Everyone else just went into the studio, did maybe a maximum of 2 takes, went out and didn't talk about it. It was disposable. I'm editing the memoirs and writing a biography of a Berlin cellist from the beginning of the last century. He was one of the most prolific recording cellists of his day. You would never know he had made any recordings by reading his memoirs. And his brother was one of the most prolific pianists who made recordings. No mention of it at all. You know, it's a much more. Casals seems to have made some recordings very early and didn't like them, so he spent. I think he didn't make some proper recordings for about 15 years, and then started doing them. I think that's the only example I know of.
Classical musicology hasn't been interested in recording until about the last 20 years, is it?
No, that's right.
That's when it's finally decided, there's this whole body of
Well,
recorded work out there.
Robert Phillips put early recordings of musical style in 1992. And he talks about the difficulties in the late 1960s, I think, as a student, I think it was Cambridge, where he said he was, you know, trying to, the idea that this is actually an academic subject was really way out there.
We had one more question, didn't we?
Yes.
Oh, right, if there's a time. I'm just interested, given the relatively recent span of recording technologies and the fact that everybody these days most people carry a means of recording audio and video around with
Literally all the time. Yeah,
and actually,
exactly, yeah,
when you
good
think
point.
about not musicality, but actual the objective quality of recordings are so much better, and will get much better. And the effort you've put into this, does it feel much more satisfying to do the acoustic recordings as opposed to the electronic recordings for you, or is it much of a muchness? Is there any greatness?
How do either of you feel about that? Maria?
I guess it's very different. I think they're both just as satisfying as the other, because with the acoustic recordings, you take 2 takes and they're so like, oh, you have to get everything, perfect and try to get across all of these different ideas.
Yeah.
But with the acoustic the digital recordings that we've done, you have the time to go in depth and think about what you have a choice in. I want to do it this time this way. Then listening back to it and thinking, actually, I don't like the way I did that. I'm going to change that to this. And then having those choices is so. I think they're just as satisfying and.
But just in different ways.
Just in different ways.
Yeah.
But doing something with your phone is just set up your phone and record something quickly.
It's so easy, isn't
Probably
it?
to put on your social media, to be frank.
And then the quality of that is astonishing, isn't it, as well? Yeah, it's really.
But the ability to edit and knowing that you can edit ad infinitum is a completely different creative process, isn't it? You're creating kind of along with the recording process. It's all part of a relationship. Whereas with I think we maybe felt a bit more dictated to with the acoustic process. You've got your one chance, and having to do a retake is so troublesome. So you're bending much more to the technology in that circumstance. So it has a different reward because it's a huge challenge. So the challenge becomes the reward, I guess. Well, it did for me partly. And that sort of frisson of if we mess it up, it's game over kind of thing. It's a completely different challenge and therefore different reward.
I think the other aspect is artifacts or lack thereof. So I don't know how it is nowadays because I'm out of date, but not that long ago, the Research Excellence Framework exercise required you to have physical copies of stuff. Like a CD-ROM of a project or, an actual physical book. With these recordings that we made with Duncan, we could have just, for much less money, just had an electronic transfer of what we did. But I wanted us to have the physical discs. Further to that, I wanted us to have proper record labels as they were a century ago, because it's a physical artifact, and I think there's something quite special about that. In the way that we now live in an age that is separating us from physical things. Nowadays, lots of people require you to read from screens rather than physical pieces of paper, which I don't like personally, although I've had to accept there are a couple of situations where I am where probably I'm going to be forced into doing that because it's not allowed anymore. But I like living a bit in the physical world, and I think there is an element of that as well, which might not be a very academic answer to the point, but it's an emotional one, that if you've got a physical thing, I think it feels more significant that you've done it.
I suppose what I was trying to get at was you have the end product, you have the music, and so you could consider the end product to be the thing, or the journey to be the thing. I'm just wondering about the way it changes you as a musician. Does that feel significant? I guess.
Yes, I think
badly phrased question.
No. I'll wrap up there just on behalf of all of us, if I may, because we're out of time very shortly. But I think that there's something about it grants a certain level of, I suppose, cultural permanence and legitimacy to something. I think that's probably a conditioned response. That if you're my generation, you've made a recording, that sort of means something. I mean, to the modern generation, that means rather less because it's so easy, and it's neither here nor there. But I mean, in this era, to have an actual oral trace, and it's extraordinary to think of quite the amount of material. I mean, Maria, there's more of you playing the violin than most major violinists in their entire career already at your stage of life. And I think that's a really quite an interesting thing. It creates a problem as well in terms of how you actually filter that and how you deal with that. It becomes a kind of watering down of the significance of these things over time. But yeah, they're all really persuasive questions. I don't really have any answers for that, but that's something worth thinking about, I think, for all of us. We have to stop. It's 11:45. Thanks so much, and thanks to everyone. Thanks to you too as well. I appreciate it. Thank you. No, I'm not doing that. If you want to come to a concert in Sheffield, there are some flyers there. 22nd of February. Commercial break. Actually, we're here on Thursday week. We're rehearsing in St Paul's. Yes, please do.
Thank you.
Thanks, I hope that was all right. Anyway, thanks, Jeff. Yeah.
So the big question that still hovers over all those questions about recording is still, it doesn't matter how much quality or how many videos you can make easily with high quality technical. The difference between a good recording and a bad recording remains. And and I don't mean technically.
Yeah, no, it's true.
I mean, when you watch it and listen to it, how does it make you feel?
Yes, exactly.
And that's of course all about playing.
Yeah. That's a thing that doesn't change.
There's no substitute for good playing. You can edit and edit and edit and edit.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I find
and it's about the touch. Ultimately, it's about that subtle touch in that one moment.
Yes, it is.
That's good.
I think that's the thing. Listening to very early recordings.
Yeah, no,
I find it very touching because most of those performers have put themselves into a completely unknown world, haven't they, of being captured forever. That they would never have dreamt of when they were learning their instruments. And they've given thousands of concerts that are gone when they're gone, and then they're being asked to go down on record. And it's really, I find it quite emotional.
There's different eras, and people have different levels of what they will accept in terms of recording quality.
Yeah.
But I think ultimately, I would say ultimately, your average person when listening to recording is not listening to the quality of the recording. They're listening to how much the music moves them.
Yeah. Well,
and they're aware that that's a recording, but and a certain level of relatively lower quality will make no difference to how much they enjoy.
The return of the popularity of LPs? A lot of people preferring LPs.
Yeah, well, and tapes, they're all coming back.
And
No,
tapes,
I think that's more related
people actually connecting more with a slightly less perfect sound.
Yeah, I think that's related to what Dave was saying about people like the physical object, and they like the ritual.
Putting the music on.
And the music is more about than just the sound. It's
what
about
we grew up with.
And the young people are actually returning them to some degree. I mean, they're still using all the other devices, but tapes have come back. Cassette tapes, which amazes me because I was never sorry to see them go. But
we're finding that
they
young
are
people,
back, and it's very niche.
Young people are wanting to go to live performances again.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it is there, but I think when it comes to the recording, there's a kind of magic quality to a good recording, which is quite hard to pin down, and it isn't to do with the technical quality of the recording.
Go to the source.
It's to do with.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
It's to do with moment by moment touches of fingers on instruments and the interaction between those touches at one magical moment, and that there's no substitute for that. At all.
One of my sons
you can't always tell if it's going to happen.
Spent serious money on very high quality turntable speakers.
No, they're really making it.
Well, it may sound beautiful. It can sound beautiful if you get the right good
This
stuff.
is what I've hated about streaming.
I
love
love
the fact you can access so much stuff. That's
I've got it all.
And you've got the world's
I've
reference
never
live
got rid of
stream.
mine.
But the act of putting music on. So for me, at Sunday tea time, we'd have our usual post tea, and my sister or I would be invited to choose a record to put on, and you got the record and you cleaned it and you put it on carefully and you listened to all of it, and then you turned it over and you listened to all of the second side. There was no flitting from I wonder what YouTube journey I'll go on today. It was a completely sort of kind of act.
Yeah, well, my dad for New Year bought a CD. Yeah.
CD
And
player. Does it make you actually choose and listen for longer?
I have not quite.
Yes, exactly.
But he definitely has been
But
doing
then,
that.
you know, if you pick a CD off our shelf,
Yeah.
take it home, you're more likely to actually listen
No,
to
I
it
will,
as an
absolutely.
experience, aren't you?
Yeah.
Rather than casually on your headphones on the way to school.
Yeah. Well, no, I tend not to listen to classical music like when I'm walking to school because like I can't focus on it. Like,
You walk all funny.
yeah, I'll be like, oh my god. So yeah, no, I tend to.
I avoid it when I'm driving.
Yeah, no, like I'll listen to it on the train because I can sit there and like listen to it, or like when I'm at home, it's a bit bored. And no, that's why I tend not to listen to.
There's something about a disc as well that's it's been chosen for you. Like someone's carefully chosen
Yeah.
what they're going to record, what they're going to program together on a disc. You know, you might have this sonata paired with that sonata, and someone's chosen that as an experience they want you to have.
Yeah.
Different collections.
I mean, playlists on Spotify, yeah, but
It's
it's not the
quite
same thing, is it? It's not the
No.
same amount of effort that's gone into curating it for you. I think I might go back to our CD collection.
Yeah.
I'm getting a bit inspired, actually.
But the thing is, when I was growing up looking at this stuff, that was so bad.
There was stuff as well that becomes really emotional for you as well. Like there were discs that I can't wear a CD out really, but
Yeah.
there were tapes I wore out.
Flow of
Yeah. It feels like such a nightmare. Having to deal with
Rewinding your tape.
Yeah, because CD, you just put it in. And
Yeah.
If you want to do it
It
again,
was
just press
such a
another
revolution,
button.
honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah, having to rewind your tape, and then occasionally a tape would go wrong, and it would all get
Right.
Yeah,
mangled.
no.
yes. Well, yes.
No, we have a bunch of tapes when my dad went to Bulgaria of my uncle playing. Like tapes of him playing Sibelius and Sarasate and this
Have you
and
got a
that.
tape player?
We have, I think we do somewhere. We have one to like download.
Yeah, we just borrowed quite a decent one off the singles.
Oh yeah.
So we're working through some old tapes that we've kept for years.
But we're trying to work
Yeah,
out how can we get
it's-
people interested in stuff. One of the things is the gaming community. All these people I used to. They spend so much time in front of screens.
Just to let everyone know, it said it on the record sleeve.
No, yeah,
It's
loads
massive
of people
that. They wanna
are
go to
like,
live
no,
performances.
so many people. I mean, Dan TDM, this Minecraft YouTuber, is now on Classic FM, hosting every week a thing on video game music, and it's like, you know, it's got so many, it's got such a following. And I,
Yeah,
Commercially,
exactly.
that's where the money
Yeah.
is. You
Well,
Yeah.
use it right for the games, not for
Yeah.
performance.
Oh well, that's exactly.
Sorry, not performance.
Well, yes, but then that's always that musicians are adaptable people. We've had to make a living, as we know.
yes.
But you know, it's
Yeah.
banal, but that is the
Yeah.
bottom line.
It is.
You
It
have to
is.
live in a
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
You've got to live in a house. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you so much for your interest.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Someone's worked out that it still exists, because nothing's ever really deleted, is it?
Well,
you,
they
Maria,
made
and
an
there.
image of the website.
Was it fun?
Yes, it was.
Bit different.
I got that from them.
Oh,
on a
you mean
memory
before
stick.
they actually
Yeah,
created the
yeah.
website?
But I got that from them on a memory stick recently, and I could only salvage a tiny percentage of what we had. And then they discovered another folder outside the website, which was full of PDF files and so big. that it
Very
must,
exciting.
it must have
So
got
you're going to
everything.
go and
I'm going to
check
collect,
in with
I'm
them.
going to collect a memory stick.
I would like to
And this
go
memory
upstairs
stick.
to the stores and look at cameras.
This
Yeah.
memory stick is the only evidence at the moment of a £500,000 research
Yeah.
project at Leeds University.
Can you
That's
imagine?
it.
The AHRC it would go.
Yeah.
£500,000.
Yeah, £500,000. Some of which was my salary. Not very much, but some of it.
Because Huddersfield decided, can't host the website.
We don't like music. I didn't say that. We don't like music. Oh, I think
Can we go upstairs and look at cameras?
Yeah, let's leave this room, dump stuff in my office, do whatever we need to do, and then we can.
Right.
Thank you for
This was
coming,
fun.
George. I appreciate
Are
that.
you hanging around, George? What are we doing? Are we going for
I'm thinking of getting something to eat.
something
Yes,
to eat?
please, I'm starving.
Yes. Well,
Where
shall
can we go?
I
Where were you thinking of getting something to eat?
What does the university have to offer?
The university has lots of quite comforting beige items, one of which I will have, or more healthy things for the more fashion-conscious eater. It's okay, actually. It's just across.
I don't want to walk a huge.
It's only
Well,
there.
let's
It's
go in
fine.
there
It's
then.
just across.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was going to suggest that.
Is it?
Right.
Yeah.
I'm going to the loo and I'll meet you at the entrance.
Okay, yeah, that's good. I need to do something similar. Shall we drop these things upstairs?
Yeah.
Do that,
Are
briefly come
we
back
going to look at cameras after?
Yeah, let's eat something. I feel starving, actually. I think that went quite well.
Yeah.
Did it?
I don't know. How can any of us tell?
I hate doing that. I'd much rather do a concert.
Oh, where are those leaflets? They're my only ones.
Yeah, I put them back in my violin case.
Oh, you've got quite a few.
I have
I'll
so
have a
many.
small amount.
Right.
Just a couple more.
Sorry, I can't do this.
Handing these out easily.
Maria, could you do me a favour? Have you got a hand-free that could take my violin case?
Yeah.
Because if we can just go up to my room, I have to have a hand-free to open doors.
Hang on.
We just dump stuff in there.
Hang on a minute. Hang
Then
on.
we can be a bit sociable.
I'll do that. You do yours.
Oh, thank you. I don't actually know how to switch off. I just